Here's the kicker. Many of people are walking around with autoimmune type conditions and symptoms, but they're never diagnosed. We are in the middle of an autoimmune epidemic. It is the perfect storm for autoimmune conditions to occur. Look at your genetics as the gun. And if you look at your environment and the lifestyle and all the things you do pull the trigger, you're not powerless. It's not a death sentence. And you actually have the ability to make a dramatic change in your overall health so that you control your autoimmune disease and it doesn't control you. Welcome to The Trusted Pharmacist, where you'll learn the truth about how the body works. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's Steve Hoffert, The Trusted Pharmacist. Do you ever live life and feel like your body's working against you? You have an unpredictable flare-up, or let's say weird fatigue that hangs on and never lets go. Bloating, skin issues, brain fog. Well, today's issue is for you. We're talking about autoimmune conditions, what they really are, why they're more common than ever, and most importantly, what you can actually do to make change if you've been diagnosed with one. But before we jump into the show, let's talk about some key facts you probably didn't know. There are over 100 known autoimmune conditions, which each year that I practice and learn more about medicine, new ones keep getting added because they just keep showing up more and more commonly. There are up to 50 million Americans that actually have an autoimmune condition. They either know it, and actually probably most people don't even know they have an autoimmune condition. And that's actually more people than have cancer and cardiovascular disease combined. And I think the other key fact that's important to know about autoimmune conditions is that 80% of them occur in women. And so if you're struggling with these issues, if you've been tired, hey, you're just tired all the time, just deal with it. It's all in your head that there's really nothing going on. Then I think, you're not crazy. And I think today's show will cut through that confusion and help set you up for success. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Autoimmune disease can happen years before you have symptoms. In the early 1980s and 1990s, when soldiers entered boot camp, they had blood levels that were drawn, and this blood was stored for a later day, long before we had the understanding of biomarkers in terms of autoimmune conditions. Decades later, once researchers started to go back and look at these blood markers with modern labs, we found many of the soldiers who 10, 20, 30 years later were diagnosed with autoimmune conditions actually had these blood markers for autoimmune conditions back in their blood back in the 1980 and 1990s, which tells us that the body started producing antibodies that are destroying tissues and organs way before symptoms ever started. This cannot be ignored. And this occurred for things like rheumatoid arthritis and something called SLE, which is a specific type of autoimmune condition. In addition, there's a new study that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that 78% of people who had lupus, which is another particular form of an autoimmune condition, had positive blood markers many years before they ever were diagnosed with the disease. So autoimmune conditions just don't happen overnight. We have to understand they often happen silently over years, and it takes enough damage and enough problems to occur before we start to have symptoms. So what exactly is an autoimmune condition? Our immune systems are in our bodies to protect us from the outside world and keep us safe from invaders. But due to an immune system that's out of balance and dysfunctional, it gets confused and begins to attack our own organs and tissues. And unfortunately, when this happens, we begin to see the disease process start. So what are some common autoimmune conditions you may have heard about? One is Hashimoto's. This is where the body attacks the thyroid. The next is rheumatoid arthritis, where the body begins to attack our joints. Something like lupus, which is a multi-system autoimmune condition, which our body attacks many parts of the body and causes a lot of damage. Psoriasis, this is where the body begins to attack in the immune system way in terms of our skin. Also things like celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition in the gut. Multiple sclerosis, where the body attacks its nervous system. And there's even some thoughts that some of the COVID pandemic and some of the inflammation by the spike protein actually triggers an autoimmune condition there that leads to many problems. But here's the kicker. Many of people are walking around with autoimmune type conditions and symptoms, but they're never diagnosed. Many times they're just told, oh, it's just stress, or hey, it's just part of getting older. But we have to realize, yes, stress can play a part in autoimmune conditions, but the stress is not the problem. It's getting the immune system under control, and we have to take a deeper dive. The biggest challenge with autoimmune conditions is trying to give a proper diagnosis. People finally have symptoms once the disease process is far along, but many times it takes years for those symptoms to occur before you start recognizing them to be bad enough and have to walk into a doctor. So the other aspect that gets done in terms of understanding our autoimmune conditions and the process is looking at certain blood markers. Some of the most common blood markers that can be done, and sometimes doctors can run like an autoimmune panel of the most common things, are something called ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies, which look for things like lupus. One of the ones that we see the most common autoimmune condition on a regular basis is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. We actually look for antibodies to the thyroid gland or something called TPO. Sometimes they can run like a rheumatoid factor to look for rheumatoid arthritis. We can also look at something like ESR, which is erythrocyte, sedimentation rate, or even HSCRP, which are markers of inflammation that can show that there's a possibility of an autoimmune condition. These are not necessarily specific to an autoimmune condition, but if we have these blood markers and we have symptoms, then we can be able to put things together and take a better look at what's going on in the body and help get the immune system under control. So why are autoimmune conditions more common than ever? We are in the middle of an autoimmune epidemic. It is the perfect storm for autoimmune conditions to occur. And let's take a deeper dive into that. First, chronic stress. When we have elevated cortisol, this causes a total disruption of our immune system and dysregulates its ability to recognize foreign invaders from our own body, and this triggers autoimmune conditions. This increased inflammatory mediators of something called interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor, and others can further drive the immune system to be dysfunctional and cause problems. The next thing is poor gut health. Unfortunately, our diets make the gut be dysfunctional, highly inflamed, full of processed foods, additives, dyes, antibiotics, toxins, underlying infections, and even just the emotional stress of trauma every day pokes holes in our guts and sets our guts up for failure. And keep in mind, our immune system is right there at the gut lining. And if our gut's dysfunctional, our immune system's going to be dysfunctional. Next thing is nutrient deficiencies, and we're going to take a deeper dive in this. But for our immune system to function properly, certain vitamins and minerals have to be there in present levels to allow the immune system to work properly and understand and do its job properly. Next is environmental toxins, and this is a big one that I see a lot, and I think often gets ignored. These chemicals are disruptors to our immune system. Things like pesticides, plastics, heavy metals, viral triggers like Epstein-Barr and COVID. Even things like mold exposure can drive our immune system to be dysfunctional, including things like gut parasites. So toxins can be a major disruptor to our gut health and our overall body health and make our immune system dysfunctional. And finally, it's just the whole breakdown of the medical system. What I see is many times autoimmune conditions are looked at in terms of one system, i.e., let's say I have an autoimmune condition of the thyroid. And what I've seen with that is we don't look at what caused or triggered the autoimmune condition of the thyroid, but let's go about and let's look at things we can do to treat that one thing. Same type thing for something like psoriasis. We have an autoimmune condition of the skin. How do we attack it? And unfortunately, if you go watch TV nowadays, every ad that's on TV is for something called a biologic. And all these biologics do is they take and they don't just suppress or calm down the immune system. They actually shut it off. They slam it one way. And like we talked about, our immune system is so important to keeping us healthy. But what happens is, let's say we have psoriasis and we take a drug that shuts off our immune system so we don't attack the skin any longer. We don't have the redness, the inflammation, the patches. And yes, psoriasis can be a very disfiguring disease for patients in terms of overall appearance. They can make them be very embarrassed, not get out in the public, which I think is horrible. And I do see patients suffer with that all the time. But these biologics shut the immune system off and definitely can help the psoriasis rashes get better. But unfortunately, in the process of shutting off the immune system, it increases our risk of infections because now our immune system is not there to do its normal job, and that's to fight bacteria and viruses. In addition, our normal processes through life, our body is constantly creating cancer cells, but our immune system goes, attacks them, cleans them up, and gets rid of them. When we shut our immune system down, we prevent our bodies from being able to attack and get rid of cancer cells, which will allow for cancer flares. And if you watch all of those commercials, they talk about all the great things that these drugs do, but at the very end, they always talk about how biologics have the ability to increase your risk of cancer and increase your risk of infection. And once again, those are trade-offs. But I think if we take a root cause approach and go after what's going on, we have a much better ability to take care and treat autoimmune conditions. Many autoimmune conditions can have genetic in nature. And if you look at that, if you have a family history of autoimmune conditions in your family, there's a good likelihood if you don't do the right thing, you may end up with that similar autoimmune conditions. But if you look at it this way, if you look at your genetics as the gun, And if you look at it, your environment and the lifestyle and all the things you do pull the trigger, if we're smart and we live a good lifestyle and we never pull the trigger, those genetics don't have the ability to rear their ugly head. So keep that in mind. It's important to understand genes are important, but genes are not the end all. They're just the start of the story. And it's what your lifestyle does later that actually can either make that story end in a good way or end in a bad way. So we talked about autoimmune conditions are very hard to diagnose. They can be kind of stealthy. They hide in the shadows. And until things get really bad and they rear their ugly head in terms of major disease, a lot of times you ignore them. So what are the symptoms or things that you might want to watch for that could indicate you might have an autoimmune condition? Those are things like fatigue that really just doesn't get better after you get a lot of rest and you take care of yourself and it never gets better. Brain fog, poor memory, low mood, and even with trying to improve these things in terms of what you would think are normal things like resting and stuff, they don't get better. Cognition things, you have the inability and you can't remember words. Those can be sometimes early signs of some autoimmune conditions. Joint pain, muscle pain that really just doesn't go away, or it comes and goes and it flares. And when it flares, it really disrupts your daily activity. Could be a sign of an autoimmune condition. Skin issues, hair thinning, rashes, eczema. Those, like he said, sometimes can be problems in terms of autoimmune conditions that we just want to watch it for and keep our eye out for. Bloating, diarrhea, bouts of diarrhea and constipation. You can't eat certain foods or foods all the time give you problems, food allergies. These can all be indications of potential autoimmune conditions. And lastly, if you just have cycles where you feel great some days, you feel horrible the other days, you can't get out of bed, you feel wiped out, you can't get off the couch. These aren't necessarily parts of normal aging. You know your body better than anybody. Don't ignore these things. If these are things that you're dealing with or struggling with, you have one or more of these on a regular basis and you just ignore them. It's just part of getting older or, hey, this is what happens. Don't do that. Dig a little deeper and make sure you don't have the beginning of an autoimmune condition. So you have an autoimmune condition. What can you do about it? You're not powerless. It's not a death sentence. And you actually have the ability to make a dramatic change in your overall health so that you control your autoimmune disease and it doesn't control you. The first thing is, let's talk about gut health. This is one of the first 4 pillars to make sure our gut is healthy and healing, because when our gut is healthy, our immune system is healthy. If our gut is sick, it's going to make our immune system dysfunctional because unfortunately, our immune system lives right there at the gut and it senses what's going on. The way we go about this is fixing and healing something called leaky gut. Leaky gut basically allows the stomach contents to get out of the gastrointestinal tract into the circulation and creates a low-grade inflammation that can cause many types of autoimmune conditions. So the first thing is eating plenty of fiber to feed our good gut bacteria. Eating lots of omega-3s to reduce inflammation. That's like wild-caught salmon, mackerel, sardines, and those. You've got to reduce sugars and processed foods. These are horrible for the gut lining and horrible for gut health and drive inflammation. You need to make sure that we're being conscientious about the foods we eat. There's a lot of data that shows grains, especially gluten and dairy, can drive many autoimmune conditions because they have something called molecular mimicry. There's actually a protein that's found in wheat that actually looks a lot like your thyroid gland. So if you've ever been diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease and you're continuing to eat gluten, you're just further making your thyroid function bad. It's going to slow down your metabolism, cause more fatigue, aches and pains, and make you feel lousy. So the first thing is, if you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, is get off of gluten. And finally, look at gut testing to make sure that we get inflammation under control. We have a good set of gut bacteria. My favorite probiotics to help with a good gut lining and good health are those that contain things like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. Any combination of those are great to help protect the gut lining. There's a new kid on the block, something called Akkermansia, which is a type of bacteria that's been shown to actually help produce more mucin, which is this nice, smooth mucus layer at the gut lining to help protect it, but also help keep the gut lining healthy. You also want to look at certain supplements, things like glutamine, which heal and seal that gut lining, along with sodium butyrate. This is what's called a short-chain fatty acid, which keeps the cells that line the gut healthy, and it's their power source. You might consider things like a 7-day detox, things where we eliminate and eat a really clean diet, do an elimination diet. My big foods that I like to see eliminated are things like all grains, dairy, peanuts, soy, and eggs. Those are typically the biggest driver of food sensitivities. But something that's sustainable long-term is something like a Mediterranean diet, so that it's low in inflammation, low in sugar, full of polyphenols to feed those gut bacteria to keep your gut healthy. And finally, one of the biggest things you can do to help with gut health, but more importantly, improve your symptoms and calm the immune system with autoimmune conditions is something called low-dose naltrexone. This is a prescription drug that is repurposed at a lower dose that actually helps modulate the immune system. That means it keeps it in the middle. And what we have found is at high doses, like 100 to 300 milligrams, it can work for certain type of addictions. But at low doses, say 3 to 5 milligrams, so that you get maximum benefit with very little side effects, it helps put the immune system in the middle. It doesn't slam it one way or the other. Like we talked about with biologics, biologics actually shut your immune system off and doesn't allow it to work as well. But low-dose naltrexone actually has the ability to keep your immune system in the middle, control this immune system so it doesn't go attack other organs or tissues. It actually has some anti-inflammatory properties in the gut, and it actually can be shown to be beneficial for cancer, where biologics actually increase your risk of cancers. So if you've never looked at or you've never tried low-dose naltrexone, you need to check it out, especially if you have autoimmune conditions. The best place that I have found to get great, free, reliable information on low-dose naltrexone is a website called the LDN Research Trust. And the website is the ldnresearchtrust.org. Check out this great website for wonderful information about low-dose naltrexone and how it can help you take over and control your issues with your autoimmune disease. The next key to controlling autoimmune conditions is controlling inflammation. Inflammation drives chronic disease, and inflammation is like gasoline on a fire when it comes to your autoimmune condition. So we've got to get inflammation down. My most favorite supplement to control inflammation is a high-quality, ultra-pure omega-3. The key is we have to take enough of it. Most patients are going to need at least 2,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA, which means we're taking at least 2 or 3 capsules of a good product, and some patients may need up to 4,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA to make sure they get good control of their symptoms. So make sure you take a good, high-quality omega-3. We can try to include that in our diet, but it's really hard to get to those levels by eating just food. Secondly is curcumin. Curcumin is a powerful supplement to reduce inflammation, but not just any curcumin. We need to get a certain type of curcumin that has what's called a phytosome or has black pepper in it to help it get absorbed, because this can control inflammation and keep our immune system in check. A lot of times when we have inflammation, unfortunately, our mitochondria get dysfunctional. They produce a lot of oxidative stress and they don't work as well, which leads to a lot of energy and fatigue issues. One of the things that I have found very powerful to help with this issue is something called methylene blue. This old drug that actually used to be a dye for clothing actually has the power to regenerate, fix, and repair dysfunctional mitochondria. So if energy and fatigue is part of your autoimmune conditions, you might want to look at methylene blue. Want to warn you, just don't go buy any methylene blue off the internet. You need to get a high quality pure product, because many of the methylene blue products are tainted with heavy metals. And I don't want you to cause more problems in terms of autoimmune conditions by taking something like methylene blue that can help you. Many pharmacies like Magnolia Pharmacy have a high quality purified methylene blue that we compound. It's pharmaceutical grade. You might look into that. If you've got chronic aches and pains with your inflammation, look at taking a high quality magnesium. My favorites are magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate. And then finally, you might even look at a compounded substance of something called oxytocin. Oxytocin for some patients has been shown to help modulate inflammation and can downregulate some of the symptoms or some of the markers of inflammation and help with those issues. And finally, another compounded option that may actually help with inflammation is something called oxytocin. This is the bonding and trust hormone that the body produces, but it's actually been shown in studies to reduce some of the inflammatory markers that can drive some of the autoimmune conditions. A third way to get autoimmune conditions under control is support your stress response. Keeping cortisol in the way that it should be produced on a regular basis, where it's high in the morning, low at night, not erratic, not excessive, or not too low. Because unfortunately, if our cortisol and our stress response is off, this is a total disruptor to our immune system. My favorite supplements to help in terms of controlling that cortisol response and your stress response, first is magnesium. It's great to help calm and relax, very easy on the system, and works very well. The next are adaptogens. My favorites are things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng. Those in combination or those separately can be very effective in helping keep that immune response in a homeostasis and a more natural balance in the middle, so that you don't have high swings of cortisol, either high or low. The next big thing is take a good supportive adrenal multivitamin. Unfortunately, when we're under stress all the time, our body blows through certain vitamins and minerals, things like vitamin C, magnesium, zinc, selenium. And if we don't put these back over time, it's going to cause problems. So my favorite is something called super adrenal stress formula, which has these vitamins and other things to help support a normal adrenal response. And finally, consider things to help control stress naturally. These aren't things you have to take, but things that you have to take time to do. And those are things like yoga, meditation, prayer, and do those things on a regular basis. Find a way to do breath work. These are all things that help control stress, lower cortisol to make sure that our immune system stays healthy. We also can do grounding mats, certain things that have been shown to help bring us in touch with our inner being, calm some of these charges that set our body off for unsuccessful benefits in the long term to help make sure that we're healthier later. And then finally, getting key sleep. Going to bed at the same time each night, getting up at the same time every morning, trying to get between 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night, making sure that we get good sunlight in the morning so we produce good melatonin at night, making sure that we get out in front of TV screens late in the evening by wearing blue blocker glasses or just not putting ourselves in front of those screens to start with, sleeping in a dark, cold room. All of these things are critical to make sure that our immune response is under control and that we have good success in terms of controlling our immune system so we don't further make our autoimmune conditions worse. And finally, the last thing that you can do to keep your autoimmune disease in check and set yourself up for success is replace key nutrients. I test patients all the time for vitamins and minerals, and people are always low in certain things. And there are certain vitamins and minerals that have been directly linked to being low and making autoimmune conditions worse. And those are things like making sure you have adequate vitamin D3 plus K. The next is making sure we have plenty of B vitamins. During stress, our body blows through B vitamins, especially something like pantothenic acid and B12. So replacing your Bs through like a B complex, especially make sure they're activated and methylated, is very important to make sure you're set up for success. The next is make sure we have adequate amounts of zinc and selenium. These are major cofactors for many of the enzymes that go on in terms of keeping our body healthy, but also controlling the immune system. And finally, if you want to look at something that kind of has all of these in one thing, that's your B vitamins, your vitamin D, and your key minerals, check out Magnolia Multi. We've put this product together to give you the key vitamins and minerals your body needs, all in a couple capsules to set you up for success, keep your immune system in check, and make sure you stay healthy. So the big truth is an autoimmune disease is not a dead end. Your body isn't attacking itself to be cruel. It's just responding to a trigger. It's an immune system that's dysfunctional and doesn't recognize you from an outside invader. But unfortunately, things like stress, your gut, poor nutrient depletions, and all the other things that can go wrong have made your immune system not do the right thing, and it's time to fix that. And we can do this. So your diagnosis doesn't set you up for failure. It just tells you it's time to act. You're not broken. Your body's trying to protect you, but it's just doing it the wrong way. So now that you understand that, let's do the things to start healing itself so that you can set yourself up for better success and so that your autoimmune condition doesn't cause you problems down the road. If you want to explore the supplements I mentioned today, you can find links to those in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, highly recommend you share it. Send it to someone who's struggling with symptoms or who can't explain what's going on. They've just been told, hey, you're sick, deal with it. Let's stop chasing symptoms and let's start looking for solutions. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve Hoffert, the trusted pharmacist, and those that want to understand and control autoimmune conditions, like and subscribe to this podcast. Thanks so much, and until next time, be well.